Welcome back to Tales from the Gig. With you again, I'm Colin.
And I'm Kevin, with my angelic things right over top of me here.
Blessings bestowed upon he.
See that? Oh, that's cool.
We are back. This is episode 2. This week we are fortunate enough to have virtually in the Rebel Base studios the great Truett from Atlanta, Georgia. And we recorded a pretty long chat with him. We weren't sure how much audio we were going to get. We ended up talking a little over an hour with him, and really cool guy.
Absolutely.
Great stories. He's got some pretty big things happening in his career that he shared with us. That was really cool, and that was pretty neat getting to talk to him and hear about that. And last week's show was our inaugural episode. You guys got to hear stories from Kevin and I. Kevin, what were your thoughts on that show?
I was actually quite surprised how great it went. You know, I was nervous. We both talked about this. What the hell are we going to talk about for an hour? But like we said, I listened back and I was like, we're pretty good.
Not too bad. not to toot our own horns. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
And we've been getting all kinds of positive feedback, from on Facebook and stuff. So it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's really
it
exciting.
It definitely is.
Never thought I'd be doing this, but
yeah, radio hosts here in our dank basement.
Yeah.
And this week we're trying video for the first time, so you guys get to see our ugly mugs.
We're working on some different things, so it'll improve over time.
Definitely.
Trying to shake off the rust from doing video and using what we have in cameras and phones or whatever. So
absolutely.
But,
like we said last week, each week we're going to feature the music of the guys that we talked to also. The intro this week was a song of mine off my first record called Like That. I'm shamelessly going to promote our music for the intros each week, and we'll do more than a handful of episodes, just the two of us, that will probably feature some more of our stuff, and who knows, we might even do a live performance.
Ooh, yeah.
We'll see.
Do a little acoustic and cajon or something like that.
But yeah, this week we've got a couple songs of Truett's from his first 2 EPs leading into the interview. We've got his song, sorry, I got the title right here. Left in the Dark is the name of the song off of his first EP, his self-titled EP. And then we close out the show with a song that actually, if I'm correct, was featured in an episode of Shameless that he talks about in the interview, called Time After Time. And,
Shameless. I have to go back and watch. I think I made it to like season 7 or something.
It's a great show. Yeah. It's pretty consistently awesome.
While, but,
and my wife and I have been watching this season. We've heard a couple of Truett songs, which I thought that's really cool. Awesome. Somebody being on there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good chat with Truett. He filled us in on a lot of his background that I didn't know about, and touring and everything he's been up to, and we're talking about stuff he's got coming up. He's got his 3rd record coming out this year, and it sounds like he's already got quite a few tour dates on the books. But he's an Atlanta, Georgia artist. A lot of our first interviews will be, since those are the people I know.
Oh, yeah. I've talked to a couple people around in the local area here that I've worked with. Mentioned it to them, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of Pennsylvania and Georgia-based artists before we start reaching out nationally.
Yeah, because I have some friends out in Colorado and everything, too, that maybe they've got stories to tell.
Yeah, and we'll probably make our wish list of guys we'd love to chat with. And also, you guys listening, if there's somebody you'd like to hear us talk to, somebody we might not know, an indie artist looking to get their music out, somebody that's a good storyteller, even if they're not a good storyteller, we'll make them sound like a good storyteller. Email us at talesfromthegig@gmail.com, or just go to our website, talesfromthegig.com, and there's a little form submission on there. Just let us know. Give us a name. If you can give us contact info, that's even better. If we've got a number or an email address, we can reach out. We'd love to talk to anybody. We musicians are one big motley crew.
Yeah, it's a big community thing.
It is, yeah, and anything we can do to help indie artists and give us a chance to chat with them, that would be awesome.
Briefly on the national news, we have some very sad news, as pretty much everybody has heard by now. And one of the absolute greatest, biggest influences in multiple genres of music, Neil Peart of Rush, passed away last week sometime. Me being a drummer, obviously, it was a huge influence on me. I was more of a. I like to tell people that I'm a cross between Bonham and Peart.
That's a hell of a combination.
I lean more to the Bonham side because just because of the music that I play for the most part.
Yep.
But, I did a prog band that all those licks and everything I learned from Peart for so long was very helpful. But it's quite a shock. I mean, it was a couple years ago, I think it was, when they decided to stop touring, and the word is that Neil had carpal tunnel.
Yep.
So
yeah,
bad.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it's been well known that, he didn't really want to tour all the time.
Right.
He kept doing it for the fans and for his, bandmates and everything. And sure, then comes out that he had brain cancer and wasn't a very easy one at all. They say it's one of the worst.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That's rough.
The coolest thing, well, not cool or everything, but they said that I saw a picture online about a year or so ago of somebody and they didn't know he had it. Very few people knew he had it. He was a very private man, as many know. But when the last year of touring or so like that, he was out there touring, dealing with this, and didn't let anybody know. I'm sure his bandmates knew and everything, but. A tribute to a man, I mean, there's so many stories out online. My gosh, it's been overwhelming. When I finally found out, I think it was Friday night, my Facebook profile timeline is just full of it, blowing up. My phone's blowing up.
Facebook was where I found out.
My girlfriend sent me the text and said about it, and I was like, Neil who? And she was like, the drummer from Rush, you idiot. So, oh, shit. So, yeah, that was quite a shock. I mean, it's kind of they stopped touring, so we kind of got used to it. But then, man, to lose him, and if you've seen any of his interviews, as private as he was, he was so eloquent in his how he spoke. And
one of the most intelligent
musicians
I think I've ever seen.
Well, a lot of people
and interviewed.
A lot of musicians know, but not a lot of fans and stuff knew that he was the main lyricist for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was reading this one article that he went through like 200 books to make sure that he had all the events correct for this one song or something like that. And that was the dedication that man had. And whether you were a Rush fan or not, they had such an influence on so many musicians, on the industry. I mean, a trio out of Canada playing, progressive rock music. That
very
was
progressive.
Not very, radio friendly and everything until the Moving Pictures album came out. But I know when that album came out, oh my gosh.
That was my first introduction to him, was that record. And, it was, I mean, as a high school kid, that was our aspiration. We all learned the intro to YYZ. Didn't learn any of the rest of the song, but learned the intro and the beginning of Tom Sawyer.
So many people think that's just the zipper, but it's an actual airport.
Yep. And it was. He was one of the first, at least the first that I was aware of, drummers that you could call a musician, like a true musician.
He wasn't just banging out things.
Exactly. Yeah, you could tell his parts, the songwriting aside. Obviously he was a serious songwriter, but you could tell his parts were thought about musically, not just rhythmically.
He was so melodic in how he played.
Yeah, that's a good word.
And that's one of the things that I learned early on from him. Is like. And they played in so many odd time signatures, and you didn't know.
No, until you tried to play it.
Yeah,
or tap
and you're
your
like,
foot.
what the fuck? A lot of 7s and 5s and stuff in there and all, but the way they wrote it, it just, the average listener didn't feel that uncomfortableness of what 7, 8 and stuff can do to you.
Right.
But it was quite a loss to our community overall, and I like you mentioned in a post, and you had said it too, as our artists in general, but musicians especially, we're so empathic with what we do and connecting with other musicians. And when somebody like that, who has been such a great influence on so many, we really felt that deeply and all. And so it's nice to see all the tributes to him out there and everything. And but Godspeed and rest in peace. I know he had some troubled years with losing some family and everything. And, But he, I know one of the funniest interviews too is he's such very blue collar type of person.
Yep.
If he had a cold, nobody knew. Mm-hmm. He went to work, did his job,
went home,
didn't bitch. But
you never heard crazy tour stories from Rush. Like they just did their thing.
Nope, they did their thing. He was like being private and all. He got away from doing fan meets and greets and everything, because it just really made him so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't understand that.
They think he's just an asshole.
Yeah. But it's like, hey, he was uncomfortable.
Well, it's like we were talking last week on our episode that separating that performer persona from your personal persona. He's the epitome of keeping those separate.
Exactly.
Everybody knew how he was on stage, but nobody knew him. It was
very rare
until that documentary came out after he lost his wife and his daughter. That was the first thing I had seen of him non-music. Right. Even in interviews, he would talk about the music and talk about the band, and that was it. There wasn't no airing of his dirty laundry. And even in that documentary, you could tell he was kind of I don't know what the word is. He wasn't super keen on sharing some of the personal stuff. Yeah. You could tell he trusted the documentarian, right. With him talking to him. But yeah, it's definitely a huge loss for the music community and music fans everywhere, of course. But we had another more personal in Atlanta, Mike Watson, a staple in the Atlanta blues and country scene. He won Georgia Performer of the Year. I think it was something 12 years in a row. Deep baritone voice, played the hell out of a guitar. He hosted a jam at a place called Montana's in northern suburbs of Atlanta for years. I met a lot of my close musician friends at that jam. Right. Drummers that I've played with, bass players that I've played with. His drummer and bass player, Paul Arredondo and Art McNaughton, have been my rhythm section, at shows. Right. And just real tight-knit community. And I knew he had gotten sick. He was diagnosed back in August with lung cancer. And I guess it was very progressive. But that was that post that you were talking about. It was I hadn't seen Mike in years. I followed him on Facebook. We'd chat every now and then, but it was you feel it. You a little bit's gone of the music scene, whether you know him personally or whether it's somebody like Neil, that we felt like we knew through his music. I remember when B.B. King passed, it was the same thing. I, of course, never met the man, but you feel it. It's definitely, it's personal, whether it's personal or not. And
we saw, my son and I went and saw B.B. King at the Jordan Center. I think it was a year before he died.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you could tell his health wasn't the greatest, but wow, still his band was amazing.
Well, and the stories he'd tell. Yeah. He could not play a note and it'd be worth the price of admission. It was just so cool. And watching him bring up younger players, the Derek Trucks and John Mayer, and they would all sit with him. If he's sitting there sitting.
That's where Bonamassa got his start.
Yeah. And guys like that, it's hard to lose them.
Yeah. When we lost BB, that was a big hit to everybody.
And Mike was that kind of guy. In his jams, he was very inviting of young players. He was very nurturing and fostering of young talent, and he was still gigging right up until the end. I know he and Paul played shows in December, and I'm sure he put on a monster show. He played regularly at the cigar bar that I play at down there all the time, and they had a musical tribute for him Sunday, which I hate that I wasn't down there for, but I know all the players went out and paid him tribute. So big loss in the Atlanta community, but rough week for music.
Rough week.
But on a brighter note, Truett this week. We really enjoyed our chat with him. It was our first interview with him. We weren't sure how it was going to go over Skype. There's a little bit of a delay you can hear in the audio that makes the conversation. It's hard to have back and forth. Right. It's kind of one person talks and the other person. But I think we fell into a groove pretty quick with him. And to give you guys kind of links if you want to check Truett out. I've got them all right here. You can go to truettofficial.com. That's TruettOfficial.com. He's got his tour dates. I know he said starting, I think next week, he's got 20 dates over the next month or so.
Couple months,
he said he and his band are getting out and kind of road shedding their new record, getting it ready to go in the studio. But he said this is going to be a pretty big year for him touring. So you can check him out on Instagram, Truett Official. He's also Truett Official on Facebook or Official Truett on Twitter, because Twitter has to be special. Yeah. And we had a really good chat. He was telling us about being on Brooklyn Basement Records, a really cool indie label ran by the great Ron Pope, and told us about them kind of taking him under his wing and fostering his talent and fostering his career. And I think he's going good places. This placement he's getting on Shameless and stuff like that, his career's definitely
really cool.
It's really cool. Yeah, his career's definitely on the rise, and we're kind of excited to see what comes. But
looking forward to meeting him. I mean, just met him on Skype here and all, but seems
hopefully.
like a real genuine guy.
He is, yeah, and it comes through in his playing. When you hear him play and you hear him sing, he's not putting on a show. He's real genuine. That's a good word for him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think he was perfect to have for our first interview.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we're going to lead in with "Left in the Dark," and here is Truett Lawless, everybody. All right, everyone. We are here with the great Truett Lawless, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Truett, how you doing, brother?
I'm well, man. I'm well.
Thanks for doing this on our inaugural interview. This is the first guest we've had.
You're the first actual interviewee.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate y'all.
Oh yeah, man.
Yep. So I was telling Kevin yesterday. I'm trying to remember where you and I met. It was probably Darwin's, I'm guessing.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, the now defunct legendary Darwin's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah, I like to remember it as the Marietta Darwins. We just don't talk about the Sandy Springs Darwins.
I agree. I'm with you on that one.
Yes, sir. But yeah, man, just to give you like a little rundown on the podcast, like we were talking, we just and we kind of gave our manifesto yesterday in our first episode of we kind of were chatting about how musicians always sit in the green room or backstage or at the hotel or in the van on the way to the gig or on the way to the next town and shoot the shit. And a lot of times our audience doesn't get to meet us in that setting. That, you're kind of turned on when you're talking to people you meet at a club and you're in performer mode. So we thought it'd be kind of cool to give people a little glimpse of how we all kind of chat with each other.
Those are the road stories, man. That's what we look forward to.
Exactly.
Swapping road stories.
That's it. So yeah, this is like a virtual campfire. We'll
basically, yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess give the people your background. Tell us how you got into music. When you got into guitar, and give them like your elevator pitch. Tell us about Truett.
Oh, man, I started. I guess I was about 10 or 11, and I was really into electric guitar from the get-go. And my neighbor, who was a close kind of family friend, had a Gibson Les Paul. And he was like the neighborhood guy where we would go over and he would help us fix our bikes, and he was kind of a handyman. And he and his wife were really cool. They didn't have any kids. And so the neighborhood kids, I was one of the neighborhood kids. We were all their kids, and she'd cook dinner, and we made like a ramp in their backyard and would jump our bikes and stuff like that. And he always had this Les Paul in his house. And I was I didn't know much about it, but I was infatuated with it. I was like, oh, it's an electric guitar, and I didn't really have much of a taste for music at that point. I just listened to kind of the records that my dad listened to. And long story short, he told me one time, he's like, when you're old enough, I'll teach you how to play it. And so time came, I was about 10 or 11. We started doing little lessons here and there. And eventually he and my dad tracked down a little acoustic guitar that my dad bought. And I started on that. And I had a little like first act, red Strat copy,
nice
kind of little toy, it was like a quarter size, not even a half size, and a little amp. And I really started picking it up when I got that acoustic guitar, and got another guitar from a family friend, and that kind of really lit a fire under me. And I just would go over to his house, and he taught me how to play. And eventually it got to the point where he said, I've taught you all that I can teach you. He played, he was Leonard Skinner and Neil Young, man. That was the only thing that he would play. He refused to play anything else. And so I learned everything in Leonard Skinner's catalog, and was a huge Skinner fan, and growing up on like Gary Rosington and Alan Collins and Steve Gaines, and so I learned all their riffs, and then eventually I was, he was like, I've taught you all that I can teach you. So I got another teacher. His name was Dan Manning, and he was out of Marietta, taught at a place called Jennings Music, and I never really learned theory. He showed me a lot how to play by ear. And I just started picking it up, and man, I was playing guitar in my room every day, 3 to 5 hours religiously. I mean, there was just like, I'd come straight home from school and I was just absolutely absorbed by guitar. I mean, it was like, it was everything to me. And I started my dad started feeding me like Stevie Ray Vaughan records and John Lee Hooker and Johnny Winter and Mountain and things like that. So I grew up on a healthy dose of blues and Southern rock. That was what my dad was really into. And I always loved music, growing up. I kind of was in between a melting pot. My dad was like all Southern rock and blues, and then my mom was like Motown and soul. And
nice.
So driving to school with mom was like, Curtis Mayfield and Al Green and the Temptations, and then, going out to dinner when dad got home from work or something would be like Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker Band, the Outlaws, Blackfoot, things like that.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I didn't really appreciate as much until I got older, the music that my mom listened to. But that also helped me, in songwriting and things like that. Cause like dad's music was like right there in your face, like hard riffs. And rock and roll. And then when I got older, I was like, oh man, that Al Green we used to listen to.
Yeah.
Like that's, with mom, like, cause that was her, she was from LA and she grew up listening to Motown and stuff like that. And, but yeah, I picked up the guitar. It was day in, day out, 3 to 5 hours a day. And then I got to the point where I felt comfortable, going to some open mics and I hit every jam within a 25, 40 mile radius of my house in Marietta, all over Atlanta and the suburbs and downtown and anywhere they would let me come in. Cause I guess I started hitting jams when I was first time I played on stage, I was 13.
Nice.
And
that's
then,
about how old I was going out in the Atlanta scene. Yeah. So any bar that would look the other way when you walked in.
Exactly. And then when I was like 14 or 15, I was really comfortable there. I'm going to jams. And so a lot of places I wasn't allowed in, my dad would take me and some places would be cool and some places wouldn't. And a lot of times we just kind of, snuck in and stayed to ourselves. And people started to see that I kind of had a knack for it. And, some of the cats that ran the jams eventually were like, hey, come to this jam, or, you can come to my jam at this bar on this night.
Right.
And so I kind of got, a little small reputation of like, oh, there's the kid, he's cool. He's not going to steal a beer off the table. Like,
right.
that helped me out a lot.
Yeah.
I was a good kid. I wasn't, trying to get in trouble. I just wanted to play, and proceeded to get my ass kicked night after night on stage by, a bunch of older and better players. And man, I just had a really good group of older cats that really, stuck their neck out for me and gave me the opportunity and taught me and, just gave me the opportunity to play. And that was, 2 to 3 nights a week. I was playing the open mics and the open jams and just learning, just absorbing everything. And then started a band of my own, a couple bands, different variations, and started writing some tunes and got linked up in 2015 with a record label. A good friend of mine that I'd known for many years started a record label. His name is Ron Pope, and he and his wife started Brooklyn Basement Records. And so I signed with them in 2015, officially 2016. Went on tour and did a couple bus tours with Ron in Europe and in the U.S. and have been just kind of touring ever since, man. And 2 EPs now, and working on the third. The third one we're going to be in the studio real soon working on. It's pretty much written, and we're just getting it down, and then hopefully maybe an EP, maybe a full length. The plan is a full length, but music these days it's hard to release a full length record.
Yeah.
So
It's all single based pretty much. Yeah.
kind of working out with the digital era. Releasing the 10 songs at once is sometimes not the best move these days. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a different landscape than it was even 5-6 years ago, but definitely 10 years ago. That's the record we're working on right now is my first full length, and I don't know that it makes that much sense. It's more just an ego thing at this point, so I can say I put one out. But well, yeah. So growing up in Marietta, for people listening that don't know the Metro Atlanta area, Marietta is probably the most, or at least was the most fertile music neighborhood in Atlanta. With all those clubs. How do you How did that influence? I mean, I know with you going to jams and the players, a lot of those cats that host those jams live in Marietta. Was it coming up in that kind of fertile area? Do you think that helped shaping your sound and shaping you becoming a performer, having all the clubs and everything to go to in that close of proximity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just as an example, when I was probably, 16 years old, you had a Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night jam. And then Fridays and Saturday nights, there was 5 to 6 clubs within a 7 to 8 mile radius that had bands playing. So I'd go out Monday, Wednesday, Thursday and play all these jams that were right around where I lived. And then if you got tight enough with the guys that ran the jams, they were playing a show on Friday or Saturday night, and you could go, sit in with them on that. So it was like, 4 or 5 days a week, man. And a lot of times, my dad was taking me or my mom was taking me, and I'd be out till 12:30, getting into bed, getting up for school the next morning, like it was all the time. Or I would be sneaking into places or catching a ride, and with a friend. And my parents were always cool about it. So that was extremely, I'm blessed in that they were really supportive. They just like, don't do drugs, don't drink, but you can play music.
Right. Don't be an idiot, but have a good time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, man, these cats that were playing, they went hard. There was a lot of talent in Marietta and Metro Atlanta, and a lot of talent coming in and out. Atlanta, Marietta especially, is a melting pot. I mean, it really is. Like, it's just, there's not that many people that live in Atlanta that are from, or live in Marietta that are from Marietta. It's people from all over the place. So we had tons of musicians coming from cities like New York and New Orleans and Chicago and relocating to Atlanta. And I remember growing up and getting to see these guys play for 5 to 10 years, and then they'd move away, and then we'd have more people move in. It's wild. I talk about that with a lot of people that are from where I'm from, Marietta. It's like we're the small percentage that grew up in Marietta, because it's a great town to live in, but people move away. But we also have a ton of people that move in, which is great. I mean, the culture is awesome, and the music scene is awesome. It's always transforming, and it's always cycling musicians in and out, which I think is awesome.
Absolutely.
For sure. And it definitely had a hand in molding me as a player and stage presence and all of that, no doubt.
Yeah, any given night where you could go out to a club and you'd have a Barry Richmond or Chris Duarte or Charlie Wooten, or the list goes on and on of these just killers, that are killers in any scene. And you can get on stage and play with them. I mean, I know when I was coming up, Barry was hosting his jams like always, and Frankie Robinson and those guys, that were very generous with their time, to put up with some punk kid, 13-year-old coming out and never being shitty about it. That's my biggest memory, is they were always very cool and very receptive, and it was a cool town to come up in, having done that also. It was definitely a rare experience. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people in my travels and playing and shared that. But for the most part, I mean, there's definitely cliques in Atlanta of certain genres, and like the blues side, the rock side, the singer-songwriter side, the country jazz,
side.
cough.
Yeah, the jazz, absolutely. But for the most part, you have your assholes in any circle, but for the most part, I mean, everybody's always welcoming, and, somebody new in town. Hey, come over here, hang out with us. Where are you from? Like, you sound great. I love your playing. And that's where we grow as a music community. And I think too, it sucks, that Atlanta's taken such a hit with the venues, because, like the ones we're talking about, I mean, you had somewhere to play 5 nights a week, and then now it's down to like 2. You got to drive 25 miles, 30 miles to one, maybe a third one. It's Atlanta's gotten hit really hard. And we just had another one, Star Bar, closed down.
I saw that on
recently.
Facebook. Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah. So
do you think that's
just dropping like flies.
Do you think that's the drinking laws?
No, not necessarily. I think it's just Atlanta's and the suburbs are just on such a rise.
All right.
I've lived here my whole life, and just to see, 10 years ago versus now, the development. I mean, there's a lot of these places that have hosted these venues, they're getting bought out, or the real estate companies are seeing, hey, we're we're going to turn this neighborhood in 5 years into the next newest, biggest thing. And the money's looking a lot better than, keeping that, client that you've had for 15 years, loyalty.
Yep. So many of those clubs, they got priced out of their property. It's amazing Northside Taverns stuck around as long as they have.
And well, we had the threat of another one, Smith's in Atlanta.
Yep.
A couple years ago, they were threatened to be gone. And I mean, that's a big place for a lot of national acts to come through, that may not be able to get a gig somewhere else. Like they can get a gig there. I mean, you can see crazy national acts at a place like that.
Oh, yeah. Some of the names written backstage at Smith's, Tom Petty, playing there in the late 80s, the 70s and shit. It's unbelievable. Some of the acts that have played there. And, of course, the acts that kind of blew up from Atlanta, the Zach Browns and the Driving and Crying and those type of bands. And, I mean, they just signed the wall. They were just another band that came through. And, I remember when they announced about them getting their lease not renewed. That was crazy because, the same with the Masquerade, when the old Masquerade went down, that was the same thing. I mean, it was, I could name 50 like big acts I saw at the Masquerade, and it was just it was better to make it apartments, so they shut it down. And I know they reopened, but it's not the same. That doesn't. It's just, I don't know.
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
I mean, being outside of Atlanta, we've always heard about that type of stuff. You know, that Atlanta was such a big scene and everything like that. And, of course, I'm talking to you, meeting you, and it's like it's not as big as it used to be. It's changed. But Pennsylvania is not that type of a scene. It's very different. It's a lot of festivals and then a lot of small bars. And
every little town here has their bar. Yeah. And that bar's been there forever, and that bar will book you. And it's definitely different. I'm getting the hang of how things are here. But it was, I hate being the guy that does it was so much better back in the good old days. Because, I mean, there's still opportunities in Atlanta.
It's different.
But it's relevant, it's relevant. It really is.
Yeah.
Because, and I think, too, also just a tip of the cap to the blues scene. The blues scene here in Atlanta is so welcoming. I mean, you can go to a blues jam and hear a solo acoustic act on the stage playing a country song, because it's like, hey, we're a stage. We may not do this all the time, but here's a stage, here's an audience. You want a shot, to do what you do. Like, it's always been open that way. I would go to jams and I know, Colin, of some that you'd see a rock band in there. You'd see a country band. You'd see a solo country artist. Well, we don't know your song, but we'll pick it out. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
They would try because they just want to give an opportunity. I think we were very blessed to have that, coming up in the scene of people that just wanted to help musicians.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were definitely the few purist jams, but we all knew which ones they were. And you knew if you went to that, there was a certain year cutoff of songs you could play. But for the most part, they were very, especially for the younger guys when we were coming up, they were a lot more understanding. When we came out, Stevie Ray Vaughan might be the only blues we know. Don't look down your nose at us because, Pride and Joy is the only tune we can play. And it was, and that's still there. It's just, like you said, Truett, with Atlanta's expanded so much, the scene has also expanded. And that was part of our decision moving up here. Was it just got too big? It's just, there's a certain point where it's like, man, I can't drive 2 hours to play a local gig. It's not local at that point,
Yeah. And, right. Yeah, it's not worth it at that point.
Yeah. Well, so since the podcast is Tales from the Gig, our gimmick was, do you have a story from a show, whether it's something crazy that happened, whether it's just an amazing show? What stands out? What's your go-to when somebody asks you, like, man, what crazy shit happens on the road? What's your go-to story? Because I know everybody's got at least one.
I guess I have a couple. I was trying to rack my brain when you asked me to do this, because I was like, "Oh, cool podcast," but then there was like a rule. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta have a
rule. Yep,
we gotta have a story. So I think one of the craziest ones for me personally, I was on tour in 2016. We kicked off the tour. This was like, I signed with a record label. I recorded my first EP in New York. And the tour was to kick off in New York City. And the first show of the tour, and I had been playing clubs like in Atlanta, in the Southeast, in Florida. Like, I hadn't really toured. And the first show was Irving Plaza in New York City, which was sold out. And we're talking like, I think it's a 1,000 cap room, and beautiful, beautiful venue. And I was to open. And there was a second act, and then the headliner, which was my good friend Ron, and he had set me up with his guitar player was playing drums for me, and his bass player was playing bass for me to make things easier, like in the bus and traveling and all of that. And at the time, I didn't really have a set band that was like able to travel.
Right.
I just had an in-town band, and so we played Irving Plaza, and that was like, just, I mean, going from, small clubs with like 100, 110 people, maybe on our best night, to 900, 1,000 folks going, who the hell is that? Like nobody knew who I was. It was my first EP. Nobody outside of Atlanta had heard of me. And that was like kind of, I guess you would say, the oh shit moment. Like feast or famine. Look, you're going to get up there and do it or you're not. I was definitely feeling something backstage for sure. I was ready. I've never been one to have like real bad stage fright. And that was one night where it was tested at least.
That's fair.
And the show was awesome. The first two songs, I fumbled through everything, and just I felt awful about it. But afterwards, the band was like, dude, nobody could tell.
They've never heard the song. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. They never heard the song. They won't hear it until you sell one of those CDs.
Right.
That just got pressed. But so that was the first show of the tour. Then we ended up doing about 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks in Europe. And the craziest, what I was leading to, the crazy story was we played in Dublin, Ireland. We played Belfast the night before, and then took the bus to Dublin. And I didn't know this, but like Ireland is kind of split in two as far as like how the country operates. Like Belfast, one way, Dublin is another. And it's like,
I heard that, yeah.
I guess you don't mix the two. I'm really not like up on it as much, but it was like a totally different world. So we played Belfast. We played this beautiful little small theater. And everyone was just so polite and so nice. And it was a great show. And then the next night was Dublin. And it was like Girls Gone Wild, like just completely different, like a joint called Whelan's Live. And it's a historic venue. And we were in the back part of the venue, the main stage. And I had tooled around Dublin that day and got to go into a guitar store, like a vintage guitar store that had just some amazing pieces. Almost spent all my money on it.
Of course, yeah.
Really?
71 SP, but that's another story. But so played the show, and it was like just pandemonium. I mean, just everybody was power drinking. Like, well, all this being said, I love the people. Like, there's not a nasty thing I could say. Like, they were welcoming, but they just went a little harder than the other.
The other ones, they're Irish.
We had done Manchester and Glasgow, but it was wild, man. It was just like power drinking, and there's no drinking law there. So, I mean, you had like 14, 15, 16-year-old girls and guys that were just wasted. And so I'm at the merch booth after the set, and I was the opener, and I'm signing CDs and selling stuff. And thankfully, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she was able to come and kind of follow behind the bus. And my parents came as well, which was really cool. And so they got to follow around to most of the shows in Europe. Well, my girlfriend, my wife now, is standing next to me, and these two girls come up, and they're just hammered. And they're like knocking over CDs and like bumping into the merch table. One girl's like, "Can I get in the picture with you?" I'm not going to even try to do an Irish accent right now, and she's like climbing all over me, and I'm like looking over at my girlfriend, like, "Hey,
I didn't do this. This isn't me. This isn't me.
Please help."
And so that, I mean, and needless to say, they were getting a little aggressive, and so finally I kind of had to just distance myself. And I'm sure they were harmless, but they were very inebriated, and it was a little like culture shock. So that night, after this said show with all these inebriated people, we had to load into the bus. And the tour buses in Europe are a little bit different. They're like double deckers. And so the front door of the bus that you step onto, there's two front doors at the front where the driver can get in, but then the main entrance of the bus is right on the side, and it's like ground level. So, I mean, with regular American tour buses, you kind of step up into it.
Right.
Well, with this one, it was ground level. And so we had the bus parked right in front because we had to like send someone in to get the final settlement and all that. And there's 13, 14 of us on the bus. It was Ron's band, who I was playing with some of his musicians, and then the support act and tour manager, yada, yada. Well, at some point, we're talking maybe 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's like just loaded in. We're tired. I guess Ron had opened the door, and I mean, he sold 900 tickets, 800 tickets at this joint. Like, you know, he was very well known. Well, somebody caught word that was his bus and that was him. And so these girls come walking over and they're like, "Oh my God, can we get a picture with you? Can we get a picture with you?" And he's like, "Sure. Yeah, no problem." And then like 4 more people started coming over, and then 5 more. And all of a sudden we had like 50 people surrounding the door of the bus. And 90% of them had no idea who he was. They were just like, "Oh, somebody important."
Right.
Like
They're just following.
there was a group of girls that had waited because they wanted to get an autograph, and they absolutely knew who he was. And then like you started just seeing all these people like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Right.
So we have 50 people surrounding this door. The door is open. It's ground level. They start getting up on the bus, and we're like, no.
Geez.
Like, we're pushing people out. One guy had gone down the street to grab like a kebab or something, one of the guys in the band. And so he's like behind the people, like, let me
Jesus.
through. So at this point, people are mobbing onto the bus, and like we're shoving people. It's getting physical. It's getting crazy.
Oh, man.
And so we had a rider for the tour where they would give you beer or wine and like, you know, food and things like that. So at one point, somebody's got the box of wine bottles, and he's like, pulling wine bottles out of this box and handing them to people just so they would
Just
back
give it
off
back,
the bus.
right?
And then the one guy that needed to get back on the bus, we're screaming at him. We're grabbing him through a crowd of people, like shoving him on the bus, passing out like beer and wine, like just to get these people to back up off of the bus. And finally we got everybody cleared out and we were able to roll out. But that was definitely like one of those like rock star moments.
That's like some Beatles shit. Yeah, that's crazy.
Beatles.
It was, man. It was wild, definitely, for sure. But Whelan's Live in Dublin, Ireland, man, it's quite a place. It's crazy.
We'll have to put that on the list. See if we can get over there and get mobbed.
There you go.
It's on my bucket list for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm Irish, so.
So you've got your 2 EPs out, your self-titled and Lies and Lightning. Where do you think your music's progressed? I know you got your start in blues and you know, where a lot of us guitar players, you know, coming up around that time did, you know, the Stevie Ray Vaughns and the guys like that. But your music's definitely a departure from traditional blues. Where do you think it's headed? Where do you see it, especially with this new record coming out?
For me, I think I've gotten to a place, man, where I'm just like really appreciating my roots a lot more. With the first EP, I co-wrote all of it, and actually one of the tunes on there I didn't write. And it was kind of like a stepping point for me to get into, and basically out of Atlanta, you know, out of my small blues circuit that I had played. And the tunes have been great, and I put a lot of work into them and a lot of my heart and soul. And it was sort of more on like, I would say an indie level, you know, very blues influenced, but very indie. And we were trying to capture like a different market, so to speak. And same with the second record. The second record I wrote pretty much all of that by myself. And now with this record, I think I'm moving more towards, I want to get back to my roots of like soul and blues and a little more traditional, and not really worrying about, you know, what's hot and what's popular and how to fit in, you know. And that's like the hardest part, is trying to, as an artist, you know, we do this because we love it. We're a little bit crazy because it's not very lucrative. But we do it because we love it. And it's easy to get sucked into the hole of like, well, how's this going to sound? Or how is people going to receive this? Or what genre does this go into? Or, you know,
absolutely.
What festivals am I going to be able to play with these songs? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like for me too, I'm a total like hyper anxious overthinker about those types of things. And I have written some songs recently, and we've been workshopping them on the road with my new band, and I'm really proud of them. And I'm like, this I don't want to put a label on this. You know, I can call it whatever I want it, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to let people receive it the way they want to receive it and call it what they want to call it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
I think that's a great way to go. I mean, today's the genres thing is like they're crossing, and you know, you've got country and blues and people doing all kinds of stuff together anymore. So I think the radio people or the record company people and stuff still has to classify, but I think more and more musicians, we're just playing whatever we write.
Yep.
You know?
Right.
What we
yeah.
feel.
Which is like totally different in America versus like speaking on, you know, touring in Europe. Like that's not the case at all. In Europe, like Radio 1 in UK is, you'll hear a rock song, you'll hear a pop song, you'll hear a blues song, you'll hear whatever. Like music is music. And that was like super refreshing for me to see is like, they don't really put music in genre like we do here in America so aggressively, I would say. You know, they still do, but it's not, you know, good music is good music. It doesn't matter like, oh, that's good pop music or that's good rock music. You know, if it's good, it's good. And they're going to play it and they're going to, you know, people are going to show up at the shows.
Yeah.
A lot of the kids are that way too. Is like they don't. I remember growing up. I mean, I'm a little older than everybody, but you were like, okay, we mainly liked rock, or you mainly liked blues or something like that. And you were kind of known for that. But nowadays, like my sons and my stepdaughters and all, they listen to everything. You know, you'll hear an Elvis tune, then you'll hear Metallica, or you'll hear, you know, just back and forth. And I think that shapes it as well. It lets artists know that, hey, you know, we can play a country tune, then write a rock tune, and write a jazz tune or whatever, you know. Just whatever we're feeling as artists.
Yeah,
so.
Whatever Spotify or YouTube recommends next is what they're listening to.
Exactly.
And I think too, like artists are starting to do that, like you said. You know, artists are starting to cross genres, and we're seeing. I think it's really neat every time that I see the artwork for a festival come up on social media, and you got like it's all over the place. I love that. I mean, you'll see bands like Tedeschi Trucks Band on the same stage as like oh my god, you know, Lady Gaga or you know
Kanye.
Trombone Shorty and Kanye or something like it. It's great. I love that. And I think that's what like real music enthusiasts, you know, the real hardcore music fans, that's why they go to those festivals. You know, I mean, festivals these days, they're starting to like to merge all of this music together. And that's the way it always has been, you know, pre our era back in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that, you know, and popular music was just popular music. It wasn't like, you know, the same four chords with a synthesizer.
Yeah,
like
there wasn't a pop genre back then. It was just whatever's popular. Yeah.
Yep. It's hip, you know, and I like to see that. I think too, like you said, with mainstream radio, I think they might be starting to kind of maybe freak out a little bit because they're like, this digital.
Spotify and all this streaming's killing
It's killing our rating. It's ratings. It's killing our numbers because people don't want to listen to the radio anymore. They don't want people to tell them what to do.
No, I couldn't tell you the last time I listened to the radio.
I'm gonna make my own playlist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's
I don't need you anymore.
Yeah, they've got to worry like the cable companies. You know, I mean, look at what Netflix has done. I mean, when was the last time you watched a commercial? You know,
exactly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just something simple like that.
TV or cable.
Yeah. Like we don't either. Yeah, we watch Netflix and Amazon and YouTube and you know all that, and it's music's gone that way. Which the established artists like the Metallicas of the world, I think we're afraid of it, but I think it's great for guys like us.
Yeah.
You know, guys that aren't selling out stadiums because it's an actual democracy now with the music industry. Like. Our music has just as good a chance, you know, if we put it on YouTube, it goes viral. How many artists have been made in the last 10 years entirely off of YouTube?
Right.
You know,
certainly, yeah. No, you're right. I was going to say it's certainly a catch-22 though. It really is. I mean, with, like you said, with artists like us that are not well known, it's an easier platform to jump on and get a start. But then in the long run, when you start looking at the numbers of what am I really making? The only way to make money in the industry now is to tour your guts out.
Yep.
You're just on the road all the time and selling merch. Because you don't even really, you don't get anything from a CD sale online you get absolutely nothing from a spin on Spotify.
Yeah, I mean, billionths of a penny. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not even a penny. Like far below that now. So it is. There is good and there is bad.
Right.
Like you said, as far as the starting point, as far as I'll simplify it to being heard. As far as being heard, yes, it's a excellent opportunity to be heard.
Yep.
And then from there, it's like, well, how do I make a career out of it?
Yeah.
You got to get real creative.
That's the guy that produced my last record, David Leonard. He's there he's actually in Marietta, like Marietta Woodstock area, and he's the head of the Georgia Songwriters Association, and just a genius when it comes to marketing and things like that. And he turned me on to a thing that a lot of guys, especially international, I think it's starting to catch on here, are doing. That's really interesting is Patreon and things like that, where
Amanda
bands,
Palmer, you heard her? She's made it real popular.
Musicians and bands are setting up a Patreon account, just like podcasters and guys like that, and they'll do private YouTube concerts.
Yep.
They'll do, almost like private, like the Tiny Desk concerts, where they'll all huddle around a laptop and do a private performance for somebody because they donated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I read an article the other day. There's an artist in Australia, and I wish I could remember her name, but what we would think of as like a local singer-songwriter, playing bars, that's completely gotten out of playing live because she's making almost six figures on Patreon.
Wow.
And she's gotten, figure 1,000 people that think she's worth $10 a month, to get that private content.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to play out. I mean, if you're making $100,000, you don't have to go play a shitty bar. You play the shows you want to.
Right.
Instead of we've all done the gas gigs, and if you've got that, and David turned me on to that, and it was like, man, if that's the way things go, like that's fucking cool. Like you just don't need the infrastructure of the major labels, for something like that.
Like we're talking about Bonamassa too.
Yeah,
he went and did everything himself.
Yep.
Because the labels were screwing him.
Well, and think how much
Like
easier
they
it would have
do
been for him if he had YouTube when he was getting going.
Right.
I mean, he has it now, and his YouTube channel's huge. But
Yeah.
man, if he had it 20 years ago, it wouldn't have taken him nearly as long.
Exactly.
And things like that, where if you can reach your fans through something like Patreon and get, for lack of a better word, subscribers. Like it feels like such a silly word to use because we're not, a cooking show or whatever. But things like that.
No, that's got to get creative.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's to me, if you can do something like that, and 90% of that money's going into your pocket versus the traditional major label route where 2%'s going in your pocket. You might not reach as many people directly, but you're reaching them all personally. I just think that's it's an exciting time, I think.
And they become really dedicated fans to you, too.
Yeah, they're giving you money. Yeah, they're part of the family. Exactly. Yeah. And
it's definitely more personal.
Yeah. And I think that's cool. To me, if I can get, I was telling Kevin, when I was in Georgia, I was doing the Monday night jams where I'd have people come over. You and I had talked about doing it before I moved. And we had a girl pop up that just saw the Facebook Live from Iceland. And every time we do, and she'd pop up and greetings from Iceland. And it was one of those things. It's like the one person, but that's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like she never would have heard my music, and she ordered a CD, ordered a T-shirt, she subscribed to the newsletter and all that. And it's like, well, I don't think I'm ever going to get to, Reykjavik, but if we do, we've got at least one fan,
Absolutely.
But stuff like that, I think, 20 years ago, that just wouldn't have happened. Like there's no way. And for every one of those, there's 10 that you don't know because they don't talk, they don't comment. But yeah, I think it's definitely a different path to success, but I think it's exciting. I think we're seeing a really like a revolution almost in the music industry.
Yeah. So do you do most of the stuff yourself? Do you have people work with you? The band split duties? How do y'all do it?
I have a manager, and I have a booking agent, so he's doing all the booking, and my manager helps me out with all the social media. He takes care of some booking as well. And he is really like kind of my go-to for anything. He's fantastic. And I met him actually through the record label that I'm signed with. And the record label has as well helped me so much getting going. They were taking care of all my social media, all of the business side, getting the CDs pressed, helped me out with merch. And since then, like the whole relationship that I've had with my record label has been great because what their goal, since we knew each other before going into business, their goal was to like give me an education on how things work, help me get started, and then like gently push me,
That's
into
really cool.
like the music world. And I was going to say, while y'all were talking about that, I had my producer and the guy who owns the record label, Ron Pope is his name, who I went on tour with. I am very blessed. I got a huge education from him on how the business side works, because he is completely self-made. Him and his wife have done everything on their own. And then now they have a team with the record label of 3 full-time employees. And he was with a major label, had this great record, and the major label, same thing, screwed him over royally. And he was like, dude, I don't need this. I can do this crap on my own. Right. So he started doing everything on his own, and met his wife, and she started running his company and started managing him, and now still has, and they have built into a record label, and now they've got this empire. And I mean, really, they did it all themselves. So I'm very fortunate that I got to be on the road with him as long as I have, and in the studio with him, and just learning, about the business, when to release songs, how to release songs, writing songs, how to talk to a venue owner, how to talk to a booking agent. I'm very fortunate. And so now I'm starting to kind of go out on my own, and with the help of my manager and booking agents, and doing this. Like right now, I'm handling my social media. My manager helps a little bit, but at one time I did have somebody that was, helping me with that completely. And now it's kind of it takes a village, and the village was this big, and so it's gotten a little bit smaller now, to where the good folks at Brooklyn Basement Records have kind of said, we're going to let you do a little bit more of this on your own, which is fine, which is great. It's been working out. I'm very thankful for everything that they taught me and have helped me with. And at any point too, things come down the line. They're still there to help. They're still there for advice. They're still there to spearhead a project if I need it. Hey, something big's happening. Recently, as an example, I got some songs on the show Shameless on Showtime. Right. And I am with a licensing company, Anacrusis Songs, which is based out of Nashville. And I have been with that company. Liz Rogers is her name, and she got me 4 placements now. So 4 of my songs were on Shameless. And that kind of came down the pipeline. And, everybody at Brooklyn Basement went into action. They're like, all right, we need to do this. We need to get some press ready. We need to set up some promo videos or some promo, stuff to put on social media. And so everybody just jumps right in. Cause they also have, 3 other artists, that they're working with, and they have, contracts with other artists that they work with for months at a time. They help them get their stuff going. So I'm very thankful for that I'm definitely not doing all this on my own. At one point, before I signed with the label, I was playing local gigs in Marietta. And now I've played as far as, San Francisco and LA, and in the other direction, Stockholm, Sweden. So for that, I owe them a lot. I'm very thankful. Awesome. Definitely been able to tour the country and out of the country. And, right now, mainly it's me and Brooklyn Basement Records, and then my manager, Randolph. In short, shout out to Randolph.
Right on. That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's cool to have an advocate like that. Somebody like Ron, who's been through the ringer, with a major label, because that was probably, if I'm remembering right, probably mid-90s when he was going through that, the height of the major label thing where they were bringing...
It was more like early to mid 2000s.
Okay, yeah, I guess man, I'm getting old. Yeah. But so that's really cool, and I think that's the place that indie labels and indie companies like that have, that most of those seem to have that similar story where they were started by a guy that just got absolutely railed by a major label, and either got burned by it or said, well, fuck these guys, it's not magic, these guys aren't wizards, I can figure this out. And the guys like that are then willing to pass that on to the next generation of players and guys, and it's not altruistic, but they don't have to. They could definitely just do it for themselves, or say, well, I'm gonna do this for myself so I can screw, the next generation of artists, to do that the way he does that. That's really cool. Yeah, I remember when you had posted about getting signed with them, I was going through their website. I was like, man, that's cool. It's nice to see a company doing it right and not completely, destroying the lives and souls of guys that are, right. Good players. So, you'd told me in your email you're endorsed with D'Addario and Fender. How'd that come about? You want to give a shout out to them? What gear are you using of theirs? And
So I got linked up with D'Addario through Ron. He's been using their strings for a long time, and
if you're listening, D'Addario, I also use your strings every guitar.
There you go.
And I use your drum heads.
There we go.
They've been great, man. They've been fantastic, and I get everything that I need from them before I go on tour. And they also own several other companies. Evans Heads, so we get drum heads for my drummer.
Yeah, that's what I use.
They own a stick company as well. I'm blanking because I'm not a drummer, but they were able to get sticks. It's not Vic First.
It's ProMark. I think D'Addario.
ProMark, yes, exactly. It's ProMark. Yeah. And so also they have their own lines of mic cables and guitar cables. So I'm buying 2 of those every few months, and which I'm extremely thankful for them. We get, everything at cost and sent to the door pretty damn fast. Wow. So we can even, order last minute stuff and it gets here rush delivery. Fender, I got linked up with in Nashville. There's a fella there that runs the Fender in Nashville. His name is Ben Blanc-Dumont. Shout out to Ben. But he's got this beautiful showroom in Nashville where you can take a look at all the latest Fenders, Strats, and Tellys and amps. And for me, I don't play Fender guitars. I'm a Fender amp guy, like hardcore. I have some other boutique amps and some other vintage amps, but I'm, my road warrior amps would be Fender. So I got linked up with him through Ron as well, who's purchased several guitars from them, and Ben is cool. So I've done a couple shows in Nashville where I can give him a call, send him an email, and say, hey, I need to borrow a Blues Junior or a Fender Deluxe, and kind of loaner amp situation, which I try not to take advantage of too much because it's really exciting for me. I got to kind of control myself. I'm like, I have my own amps for this show, but I could use the new
Fly Me 8 super reverbs.
Yeah, I'm definitely not on that level yet of flying amps. So if I'm in the area, he's like, yeah, man, come by and swing in and grab what you need. So for that, I'm very thankful. And now that's all I'm playing right now is Fenders. My main rig is 2 Vibra Kings, and then I have 2 Blues Juniors. So I kind of alternate, like most of the time, I'd say predominantly, because for like medium to small size rooms, I've got a Vibra King and a Blues Junior, and I run them in stereo. One has like all the lows, and then one has the highs and the reverb.
Yeah. That's a hell of a combo. Yeah, that's nice.
Sort of wet dry rig, not completely, because I do have effects running through both of them, but usually only one amp has reverb coming out of it at a time. And then for really small stuff, I run 2 Blues Juniors. So, wet dry. But yeah, it's been really cool getting to work with some companies like that. D'Addario, shout out. Colin needs an endorsement.
Yeah. Strings. I break strings a lot. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, we've kept you for an hour, man. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Kevin, you got anything else for Truett?
No, that's love hearing those stories.
We appreciate you coming on our inaugural interview of the podcast, episode 2.
Thank you, Phil. I'm honored that it was episode 2 and the first interview one. That's awesome. I'm very honored.
Tell the throngs, the huddled masses, where they can find out more about you, see your show schedule, get your music, send them out let us know. Yeah, I just released a big load of tour dates. TruettOfficial.com. That's TruettOfficial.com. TruettOfficial.com. I am Truett Official on Instagram, Truett Official on Facebook. Official Truett on Twitter, but I don't tweet too much. I'm more of an Instagram and Facebook guy. But yeah, we just released. We're old too.
Yeah. Well.
January through March, a bunch of dates. I think it was about like 20 dates, maybe a little bit less. But we're adding to the calendar weekly. So I just dropped 2 dates on Instagram that are not on that tour schedule just yet because they're coming in. We're booking a bunch for 2020. But yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. That's kind of where everybody gets the first notifications of everything. I love Instagram. I just go on there real quick and give announcements or talk on there for a second and let everybody know what's going on.
Less
Yeah, man.
drama.
Yeah, just pictures, no politics.
No politics there.
Yeah. Politics.
We'll have all the links to all of Truett's website and Facebooks and Instagrams and everything on our website, so you guys can check them out. And man, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, man.
It was really good talking to you.
I really appreciate you having me. Seriously, I'm honored.
Sweet.
We'll hope to see you at a show sometime.
Right on.
Truett Lawless, y'all.
You've been running